The Zaltine Council meets to mock primitive rumors of human sky monsters until every orbital sensor screams red. What they see isn't possible. What they hear breaks protocol. A silent countdown begins, and from the dark side of their moon, something older than any of them awakens. The Grand Councillor's fronds twitched, a subtle, cultured disdain. "End this broadcast," he rasped. "We will not waste another breath on primitives and fireside myths." Around him, 11 other figures floated in crystalline suspension, minds tethered to the orbital mesh, relaying data from 3 hemispheres. Beneath them stretched the technoglass. Chamber of Veldarun, the capital's central command tower, spiraling like an obsidian spine into the aurora-filled void of the stratosphere, projected in shimmering light above the council's core. A crude wireframe shape, jagged, irregular, and absurdly massive. "It's an atmospheric glitch," scoffed Defense Minister Urunkay. Sensors pinged some abandoned husk, perhaps a lost Takari cruiser. No emissions, no life signs. No, the room went dark, all of it. No failover, no low-light protocols, just void. Seconds later, a single frequency ruptured their emergency audio system. It wasn't Zaltine. It wasn't even galactic code. It was a human voice. Static. Then silence. No heat signatures. No propulsion flares, but hundreds, no thousands of mass shadows began to coalesce along the orbital ridge. Down in the planetary lowlands, a Class 5 atmospheric hydrologist named Riken Vey stood beneath a heavy green sky and stared upward. He didn't know what he was looking at, only that it was impossible. The sky had changed, not in color or texture, but in tone, as if something had placed an ocean above their heads, dark and pressing. He raised a monocle scope and zoomed. That's when he saw it. A triangle, blotting out stars. No engines, no impulse, no wings. Just silence wrapped in gravity, hovering above the capital. Riken began recording. High orbit, dark side of the moon. A single human command vessel slid from behind the satellite's curve. Its hull shimmered with radar-absorbing latticework. Its mass density fluctuated subtly, a human innovation the Zaltine had never cracked. Passive displacement cloaking, bending gravity around mass to mimic emptiness. On board, Fleet Commander Arya Cade stood in a carbon-black operations chamber. Surrounded by projections of Zaltine orbital systems, her hand hovered above a single input node. Countdown, 0014. "They're still not responding," said Lieutenant Daris, voice low. "They think we're myths," Cade replied. A beat. And myths don't negotiate. Her thumb pressed the node. Back on the Zaltine surface, sky glass shattered. The clouds above Veldarun cracked like lightning-torn skin. A ripple, impossible to describe in physical terms, shimmered across the entire sky. Not an explosion. Not light, just absence. And then, one by one, the stars winked out. Each was replaced by a shape, black triangles, dozens, hundreds, some a kilometer long, some a dozen. Each one matte black, heatless, still. Zaltine military channels screamed with overload, pilots blacked out mid-launch. Gravity warped above the capital. A ghost protocol activated. All planetary comms reverted to fail-safe mode. That's when the voice returned. Just 3 words. Human, low, calm. Then the feed cut. And above them, warships spanned their sky. Every eye turns upward. The myths were true. The humans had never left. They'd only waited. And now the sky belonged to them. The Grand Councillor's fronds had never twitched in fear, not once in 5 solar cycles of rule. But now they trembled. Not from cold, not from weakness, from something far older. Dread. Around him, the council still floated in dignified poses of denial. The lights were back, flickering pale across the chamber, but none of the data feeds had returned. Every neural tether was slack, every connection dead. Minister K muttered, "Impossible." But his voice had no weight anymore. The human voice had cracked something open, not just in their systems, but in their minds. It hadn't asked, it hadn't warned, it had declared, with all the serenity of inevitability. Outside the council tower, Veldarune's sky was no longer a sky. It was a veil, a shroud, a waiting silence, and in that silence new signals began to pour in. Not Zalthine, not even coded, raw, brutal, wideband, telemetry, angles, loadouts, not for them, for the fleet. Something was coordinating the black shapes now crowding orbit, and whatever it wasn't hiding anymore. It was broadcasting intentionally, as if daring the Zalthine to understand. Below, in the flooded market district of Telkaresh, children pointed upward, their voice filaments fraying under the weight of unspoken panic. A grandfather fell to his knees, praying not to his gods, but to the myths. The old ones, the war ghosts from before recorded time, the sky monsters. And still the triangles did not move. They didn't have to. One alone was a weapons platform. 10 could glass a continent. 100 was something else. Back in high orbit, Commander Arya Cade stared at the planet spinning beneath them, one eye twitching from neural sync strain. The ops room was still dark, except for the crimson starlight. Outlining her face, targeting grid locked, came Darius's voice. "But they're not resisting." "They will," Cade said, "when they realize this is real." Darius hesitated. "You think they're afraid?" "No," she said. "Not yet." She gestured, and the projection changed. Not a tactical map, not fleet status, a history overlay, every point of human loss, every colony erased by silence, every beacon destroyed by Zalthine containment centuries ago, back when humans were just an expansionist mistake to be purged quietly. Back when the Zalthine thought myths could be buried. Cade didn't smile. She hadn't smiled in years, but her voice softened when she spoke, not to Darius, to the planet below. To all listening, we did not come to conquer. We came to return. Silence. Then a new shape emerged from the edge of the planet's shadow. Not triangular, not silent. A sphere, vast, cyclopean, its surface etched with impossible grooves. It moved under no power. It simply appeared. And when it did, every Zalthine on the surface heard the same thing, not through comms, not through sound, inside their minds. In the council chamber, the Grand Councillor could no longer move. His neural implants had gone cold. His breath was shallow, not because he was dying, because he finally remembered. The humans hadn't been exterminated, they'd been evacuated, and something had been left behind, something old, something watching, something awake. The chamber lights exploded, and in the burning dark, 11 minds screamed, deep within the stone-glass canyons of Relith's reach, where the planet's electromagnetic crust rendered orbital scans unreliable. Hydrologist Recon Vey stumbled through ankle-deep floodwater, still clutching his monocle scope. The feed wouldn't stop playing. That triangle, that absence in the sky, the way it drank starlight like breath. He had never believed the human myths. No one did. They were bedtime stories, old war propaganda repackaged for entertainment. But now his skies had gone quiet, and quiet wasn't safe. Above him, the last functioning local sky drone jittered in and out of focus. It tried to upload its visual log, but the mesh was gone. Replaced, not by interference, but by order, a higher logic had taken control, not just of their orbital data, of gravity. Is this what we did to them?" Recon whispered. "No," one answered. Not because no one heard, but because across half the planet, language itself had started to break down. Comms choked on unpassable data, syntax engines rebooted and failed, even telepathic relays, once the pride of Zalthine. Superiority stuttered, then fell silent, because something was rewriting the rules, not software, not code, reality, high above, The Vindicator of Echoes, second human vessel to reveal itself, blinked into visibility for only 3 seconds. That was enough. Every military array pointed toward it, seized and shut down, on board the first command. Vessel Commander Arya Cade stood barefoot now, a signal to the crew. This was not a war, this was not a strike. This was a reinstatement. The Zalthine had forgotten, but the humans had not. Protocol Wraith is stabilized, Darius reported, sweat glistening on his temple. Quantum anchors across all 243 ships confirmed. Darkside fleet maintaining drifthold. And the surface? He hesitated. Council grid is down. Planetary defense went null the moment the relic activated. Cade looked up. The relic, the ancient sphere that had emerged over Veldarun, was not a ship. It was older than ships. It was the marker, a thing placed long ago, a promise in orbit, and now that it was awake, nothing below could lie to itself anymore. Begin memory seeding, Cade said. Darius paused. All of it? She nodded. They buried us. Let them remember. And with that the sphere bloomed. No lights, no energy wave, just understanding. All across Zalthine cities, things began to feel wrong. Statues twisted, glass reflected memories that hadn't happened. Or hadn't happened yet. Citizens dropped to their knees as ancestral fear crawled up their bloodlines and whispered names they had no right to know. Children wept at shapes they'd never seen before. And still, above, the ships did not move. They didn't need to. Inside, the council chamber, Minister Uren screamed and slammed his neural port against the crystal interface. "This is trickery. Show me the enemy. Give me a target." The crystal pulsed once, and then for the first time in 1,000 years, the humans let them see. Arya Cade's face appeared, not as a projection, not as a transmission. She was there, in the center of their council floor, perfectly still, not blinking, a ghost. "A fact," she said without speaking. The chamber began to collapse inward, not from force, from guilt, from history, from the weight of lies collapsing under the gravity of truth. Outside, the sky was full. Now, not of stars, but of ships, and not one of them was leaving. There were no alarms anymore, no klaxons, no sirens, no war cries. Only the low, throbbing hum of planetary inertia giving way, as if the world itself were holding its breath. In the sub-crust archives beneath the city of Zevral, archivist Telai Nor blinked awake inside her hibernation pod. The emergency, cycle tripping for the first time in over 400 years. Her neural link surged hot with ancient protocols, booting into modes not used since the pre-unification wars. Her first thought wasn't fear, it was recognition. They were back. Her. Second thought, we were warned. She staggered out of the pod, robe still stiff with stasis crease, and touched the wall. The interface peeled open, revealing a single file, locked, read, encoded in a human dialect dead for a millennium. She spoke it anyway. Override protocol. Ragnar Redline. The chamber groaned. Above her, thousands of meters of reinforced. Soil and obsidian tower were peeling apart, slowly, methodically, like something was unraveling the past from the present. Because it was. On the surface, cities began to deform, not from impact or weaponry, but from memory. Human cities, long buried and overwritten, began to reappear, pushing through alien infrastructure like ghost limbs, remembering what they once were. Structures rebuilt themselves in impossible ways. Backward, sideways, concept first. A fortress of steel emerged from the crater of a Zalthine university. A monolith rose through the capital's museum, splitting it clean in two, revealing artifacts that had never been catalogued. A mile-wide engraving, unseen for centuries, now glowed at the base of Veldarun. We did not leave. In high orbit, the triangle ships rotated as one, not toward the cities, toward the moon. Fleet Commander Cade stood still, eyes glazed in neural trance as dozens of timelines played out around her. In one, the Zolthene surrendered. In another, they attacked. In most, they ran. But none escaped. Not because the humans hunted them, because there was nowhere to go. "You feel it?" she murmured. Darius did. Every human in the fleet did. A pulse, deep and old, resonating from within the moon itself, not a natural satellite, not even close. "That's not a moon," he whispered. "No," Cade replied. "It's a vault." And now it was opening. The dark side of the moon began to slough away like dead skin, revealing layers of something beneath. Not metal, not stone, but memory. Architectures that had no right to exist. Designs etched with grief and hope and fury. Then came the light, not bright, not blinding, just true. In the council ruins, the Grand Counselor wept openly, face lit by the memory of a war he had not lived through, but had inherited the silence of, and in that light he saw it, Earth. Not as it was now, as it had been. Oceans blooming with life, cities teeming with impossible ambition, humanity's great reach across the stars, laughing, burning, hoping, then fire. He saw what the Zolthene had done, what he had come from, and he broke. One by one, surviving planetary leaders began broadcasting surrender, but the signals never reached orbit, because the humans weren't listening for surrender. They were listening for understanding, and none came. Commander Cade closed her eyes. Initiate Veilfall. Below, the reconstructed human citadel in Zevral lit its first beacon in 1,000 years, and in its signal was a single word. In the dark hollow of what once was the Veldarun command spire, Zolthene survivors huddled in silence, watching the skies not for war, but for meaning. The human ships hadn't fired, not a single bolt, not a single drop of kinetic wrath. And that was worse, because it meant this wasn't conquest, it was reclamation. Above, the fleet pulsed once, thousands of ships synchronized, like neurons in a single sleeping mind. And then, slowly, as if remembering an ancient choreography, they began to shift. Not in formation, in function. Each triangle folded, unfolded, became something else. Structures opened, towers extended, panels reconfigured. Not weapons, cities. They were lowering themselves, not with force, but with grace, towards specific places on the planet's surface. Not military targets, but memory-rich zones, places once called home by a species exiled from its cradle. From within the vault on the moon, a low vibration echoed across space, impossible to detect on instruments, but deafening in the soul. Recon. Vey heard it clearly, standing on a flooded ridge with his recording scope still in hand. He had dropped to one knee without realizing it. The sound wasn't a sound at all. It was a recognition. Like the world itself had whispered, "We remember you." And in his mind, a vision bloomed. A child in a red suit, laughing among leaves that no longer existed. A voice calling out over wind and war, a wordless promise that they would come back. Then the sky blinked. The human citadels touched down. They didn't crush the earth. The earth bent to them. Terrain shifted, roots parted, old metals cracked open to let the landing gear settle. Machines older than memory walked out first. Drones with skin like woven carbon, eyes like pale suns. They moved without hostility, without sound. They scanned, they recorded, and when they found remnants of human history, they bowed, not to dominate, to honor. In the heart of the Zevral beacon, Telai Nor walked through light that responded to her breath. It wasn't reacting to her species. It was responding to grief, to knowledge, to the burden of having buried the truth beneath centuries of policy and fear. A figure waited in the beacon's core, not Cade, another, pale, still, not flesh, a human child hovering inches above the floor. Eyes closed, arms crossed gently over a faded uniform. When Telai stepped closer, it opened its eyes. The girl spoke in perfect Zolthene, not angry, not accusing, just true. Telai fell to her knees. "Why come back?" she asked, choking. "Why now?" The ghost girl blinked. She turned and the light expanded. A new map bloomed in the air. Every planet in the sector, every atrocity, every silence. The girl lifted her hand one by one. The stars turned red. "This was never vengeance," she said. In orbit, Commander Cade stood with her hands behind her back as the vault's core split wide. From within, a light neither warm nor cold poured out. A light not made for stars, but for reminders. Across the galaxy, ancient warning buoys flickered to life. Some races fled, some knelt, and others simply stared upward as the sky rewrote itself. Not with fire, but with truth. The pulse hadn't begun. It had always been waiting. In the far silence beyond the moons, deep beyond known lanes and mapped orbits, there drifted a thing without designation. Not a ship, not a signal, just presence. The ancients had called it the veil. The humans had called it the weight. The Zolthene had called it nothing at all, because in their arrogance they assumed the sky was already theirs. They were wrong. From the vault's awakening came resonance, folding not just into local space, but into the dark seams between galaxies. And what it touched it called, and what it called answered. On the capital's remains, the last standing Zolthene node translator bled out noise across all open frequencies, syntax unraveled. Clocks reported time in reverse, gravity twitched and corrected, every science bent slightly toward panic. Inside the ruins of the command spire, Reckon Vase stood with Tele Nor beside the ghost child, whose eyes no longer blinked, whose feet no longer touched the ground. "I don't understand," Reckon whispered. "If this isn't war, then what is it?" The girl turned. Around them holograms formed, of great halls, human councils, peace attempts, declassified by force, truth as weapon. "They offered alliance," Telai muttered, tears in her voice. "We said they were too wild, too emotional." The girl tilted her head. A rumble shook the crust beneath their feet. Not quake, not blast. Entry. Above, more ships arrived, but not from human command. These had no form, no engines, just mass with memory. Triangles the size of continents, falling into reality like forgotten sins returning for their due. Fleet Commander Cade watched them emerge and didn't flinch. "Final acknowledgements?" she asked quietly. "None from planetary leadership," said Darius, "but civilian transmission spikes are off the chart. They're praying, Commander, some to us, some to the sky." "They're right to." She turned to face the projection. "Of Earth, old Earth from before the fall, before silence, when the pulse completes," Darius asked. "Will it destroy them?" "No," Cade said. "It will show them, and they'll wish it had destroyed them." In the Citadel core, the ghost child stepped forward and placed her palm on the relic wall. A sound rippled out, indescribable, but final. Every screen across the planet went black. Then a single symbol burned into existence. Not text, not art, just a shape, a triangle, outlined in red. Then 3 words across orbit, each human vessel aligned like teeth in a gear. Inside the vault, entire civilizations flickered in the reflection of memory, and above it all, the dark sky, once home to myth and legend, opened one more time, not to release death, but to release truth. As the pulse began, it didn't sweep across the world like energy or fire. It unfolded, rewriting cause and consequence, showing every living being not what was happening, but what had already happened, and who had been erased to make room for the lie. On every continent, voices screamed, not from pain, from recognition, because Somewhere buried deep in their blood they had always known. The humans had not vanished. They had been waiting, and now they remembered why. There was no color in the sky anymore, only dark shapes shifting above the stratosphere like gods in mourning. The pulse had begun, not as thunder, but as memory, and memory was crueler. The planet of Zalthine reeled, not from weaponry, from history. In the central atmospheric station, at Selkara, scientists wept as satellite arrays displayed events that had never happened, and yet always had. Ghost data streamed from the vault's echo, forming perfect simulations of Earth's final broadcasts before the fall. Children screaming in unfamiliar languages, cities consumed by orbital fire, diplomatic envoys gunned down mid-transmission by Zalthine hands. One recording returned again and again, a woman, blood on her collar, holding a child in a stasis wrap, speaking to a camera through static and smoke. "We were never your enemy." The feed ends with white noise, then a flash of red triangles, and silence. Reconvey watched the stream on a loop. "This is impossible," he said, voice flat. "I studied pre-expansion records. These events aren't in any archive." Telai, nor didn't look at him. Her eyes were locked on the ghost child, who now stood in a shaft of vault light, as if awaiting judgment or passing it. "They were removed," Telai whispered, "deliberately by our forebears." The child turned. "Slowly, we asked for help. You sent a fleet." Then the ceiling trembled, not with sound, but with arrival. Another ship breached orbit, this one not shaped for battle or atmosphere. It bore no weapons. Its surface was not matte, but reflective, a great floating obsidian mirror that cast no shadow and showed no stars. Its name was spoken in the pulse, the first of the Earth-Seed arcs, lost until now. Inside its hull, preserved across centuries of cold drift, were human ancestors, not alive, not dead, stored, consciousnesses locked in pattern stasis, 1,000 minds in sleep, a generation that had refused extinction. They were waking up. On the vault bridge, Commander Cade bowed her head. Around her, human officers joined her, not in triumph, but in reverence. "Begin the calling," she said. One word spoken, across every channel, every planet, every buried truth. The pulse surged, and now it wasn't just Zalthine, who saw. Across dozens of worlds, old civilizations stirred. Races who had stood aside during the Great Silence, who had accepted the lie, benefited from it. Now they saw the cost. Entire species who'd thought humanity was legend, now watching as the truth poured from the vault like judgment in light form. The humans had not been wiped out. They had been hidden, buried beneath rewritten treaties, falsified wars, and economic collapse designed to fracture the Terran unity. But memory is code, and code doesn't forget. Above the planet, the Aureliath opened a single communications stream, one voice. Familiar, the same voice from 1,000 final transmissions. "This is Earth, not the planet." "The idea," a pause. Then the ghost child lifted her hands, and the sky cracked, not physically, but narratively. Every history book, every planetary record, every archival AI flickered and rewrote itself, not because of war, because of truth. And now, the galaxy didn't just fear the humans. It knew them. The myth had returned. But this time it wasn't myth. It was proof. Beneath the twin suns of the Zalthine equatorial shelf, time fractured. It wasn't visible, not like lightning or war. It was felt. In the breath that came too early, the heartbeat that skipped without reason. All across the planet, causality bent inward. Moments that hadn't happened, yet remembered themselves into existence. People tasted memories that weren't theirs. In the ruins of the Vel Darun Council Chamber, Grand Councillor Arix Nith stood barefoot in the dust, robes discarded, fronds limp with exhaustion. Around him, ancient screens glowed with words in dead languages, his ancestors' crimes line by line. The silence was complete until a tone rang out, a low harmonic, not mechanical, not synthetic. A human frequency. The walls shifted, a door opened, a single figure stepped inside, not a ghost, not a projection, a woman in black, skin marked with thin silver traces, eyes as calm as glaciers, Fleet Commander Arya Cade. "No guards?" she asked. "Softly. I ordered them away," Nith replied, voice cracking. "There is no defense against what you've brought." "I haven't brought anything," Cade said. "You're just finally seeing it." He nodded, then collapsed to his knees. "I believed the lie. You were the lie." And she stepped past him into the Council's central core. There, a new symbol glowed, not Zolthine, not Terran, something older, the Seal of Return. She touched it. Above, every human vessel synchronized. The pulse reached phase 2. It no longer just remembered. It began to restore. Across the planet, structures that had been paved over by expansionist colonies cracked open, revealing underfoundations of human design, transit gates, neural relays, atmospheric processes. The Zalthine hadn't conquered Earth's colonies. They had built on top of them, like bones buried beneath a temple, and now the bones were waking. In the outer rim cities, civilians fell to their knees, whispering names they didn't know, names that belonged to ancestors they'd never met. Each whisper was a key. Each key unlocked a fragment of truth. In orbit, the Aureliath split into 8 petals, each one descending into gravity sink like a blossom meant for soil. From within, stasis cradles lifted. Children emerged. Humans, eyes wide, scanning a world that wasn't theirs anymore, but had been once. They did not cry. They stood, and one by one they spoke a word none had taught them. Home. Etelai Nor watched them descend from a data window deep in the Citadel core. She had stopped resisting, stopped denying. Now she simply bore witness. The ghost child stood beside her. "Will they forgive us?" Telai asked. The child tilted her head. Then she blinked, and for a moment her eyes held a reflection not of Telai, but of stars burning out. In those flames, Earth, broken and beautiful, not gone, waiting. Arya Cade lifted her hand one final. Time! In the skies, the pulse climaxed, not in fire, not in death, but in redefinition. Across the sector, AI clusters shut down. War fleets halted mid-flight. Communications collapsed into silence. And in the silence, a single transmission. One by one, the stars began to shift, and the galaxy understood this was not invasion. This was reckoning. The stars no longer looked the same. They weren't brighter or dimmer. They were closer, as if space had folded inward to watch. Galaxies that once drifted light millennia apart now shared a breath. Ancient constellations cracked open like shells, revealing coordinates long thought to be black void, each one now pulsing with faint red glyphs. The pulse had reached the expanse, and the expanse was waking up. On Virel 6, a mining moon far. From the center, a crew of 3, unaffiliated, undocumented, and until now unbothered, witnessed the impossible. Their own base had aged backward. Rust reversed, wounds sealed, a broken viewport reintegrated without touch, and on the comms, each of them collapsed, not in pain, but in clarity. On Zalthine, cities built on false histories collapsed, not from kinetic force, but from truth. Entire infrastructure lattices crumbled when stripped of the data they were built upon. Power grids fried themselves trying to process ghosted data patterns that predated the Zolthine's own system calendar. As you see, truth was corrosive because it had been denied too long. In orbit, Arya Cade stood aboard the Aureliath's inner sanctum, not a bridge, not a war room, a cathedral of memory. Every wall flickered with names, not casualties, erased. 700 billion, Darius whispered. That's the updated count, Cade nodded. 700 billion forgotten, folded into nothing, lost. She turned slowly. Not anymore. A new sequence activated. In deep vaults across the stars, on moons, on derelicts, in fractured ice comets, Earth codes lit up, old servers, old songs, old voices, all seeded millennia ago when the humans realized they were going to lose the narrative, not the war. They'd encoded their story in light, buried it where only truth would reach, and now the truth had teeth. Back on the surface, Grand Counselor Eric Snith walked through the ruins of his own palace. No guards, no servants. Just echoes. A drone passed overhead, triangular, silent, matte black. It paused, then projected an image onto the rubble, a photograph of a human child and an alien, Zolthene, older generation, standing together, smiling. Caption, diplomatic. Accord, year 4 of Unity era before the betrayal. Nith stared, tears forming at the base of his secondary eyes. I didn't know, he whispered. Came the child's voice from behind him. He turned. No one was there, only the wind and the smell of ion-churned stone. Reconvey broadcast from a cliff now, the last living hydrologist with an open line to a shattered audience. This is no longer about humans, he said, voice raw. It's about the galaxy they gave us, and the truth we buried. This isn't retaliation, this is memory enforcement. The sky responded. Every star above pulsed once, not with threat, with reminder. And across all networks, one final prelude message blinked to life, a triangle, a timer, and a phrase in every language. Choice, not. Surrender, not allegiance. Just one question. Will you remember what you saw? Or bury it again? And the galaxy held its breath. The timer hit 0, but there was no flash, no detonation, no end, just light. Light without heat, without mass, without judgment. Across the Zolthene skies and 100 other worlds, the pulse resolved. Not in destruction, but definition. What had been fractured was now whole. What had been denied was now undeniable. On the vault's highest platform, beneath the stars that had once mocked Earth's silence, the ghost child stood still. She did not glow. She did not speak. She simply was, a fixed point in a rewritten universe. Her presence no longer a projection, no longer code. She was memory, made flesh. Below her, the last of the human ships hovered in perfect formation, silent, vast, shaped like blades of history, buried deep in the sky and sharpened by time. They had not fired a single weapon, and they had won. Commander Arya Cade watched the final calibration complete. The Aureliath's core spun down into standby mode, its mission complete. No conquest, no colonization, just remembrance. Status? She asked quietly. Darius stood beside her. 173 civilizations have reclassified human status to origin species. 32 have initiated cultural restitution protocols. Zoltene command structures collapsed. Civilian centers are calling for war crimes tribunals on themselves. Cade nodded. And the rest? They're silent. Good, she exhaled. Let them sit with it. On the ruined surface of Vel Darun, Tel-Ainor stood before a growing crowd. Thousands of Xaltine, not soldiers, not elites, just people. Listening. She didn't give a speech. She played a recording. A mother's voice, speaking from a bunker, holding her child. We chose not to fight. We chose to hope you'd listen. We chose wrong. But we never hated you. The child in her arms blinked at the camera. Then the screen cut to black. No applause, just wind and the understanding that truth once seen could not be unseen. In deep orbit across the final relay node, the last transmission of the pulse echoed across the stars. A voice, male, calm, old, human. This is not retribution. This is not resurrection. You erased us. And we are still here. Silence followed, not emptiness, reverence. 6 months later, the galaxy was different. Zalthine control had dissolved into 100 autonomous regions. New alliances formed overnight, each based on unedited records. Educational hollows were rewritten, statues torn down. Some planets lit fires of mourning that lasted for weeks. Others quietly shut off their comms and wept. But Earth, true Earth, remained hidden. Not because it was gone, because it was guarded. A myth reborn not into war, but into warning. On the edge of the Orion expanse, a small freighter passed a black monolith in orbit. No lights, no signal, just a floating triangle. The pilot saluted, without knowing why, and moved on. Some truths live in silence, beneath the crust of a now silent moon. The ghost child returned to her seat in the vault, a simple metal chair, a flickering holotree above her. She closed her eyes and sang a soft, human lullaby. Its melody had no translation in any alien language, but the galaxy heard it, and for the first time in millennia it listened. In a forgotten language, etched into the hull of the last Terran Ark, were 4 words: "We never left you."